I speak 9 languages, said the son of the black cleaning lady. The Arab millionaire chuckled, though his laughter carried a note of disbelief. 9 languages? Ha 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 ha. Hassan al-Mansouri's booming laugh filled the vast Manhattan penthouse office, rolling across the marble walls like the growl of a predator amused by its prey. Kid, you can barely string a sentence together in English. 14-year-old David Johnson stood tall despite the sting of humiliation heating his cheeks. His worn public school backpack hung from one shoulder, out of place against the luxury surrounding him. At his side, his mother, Grace Johnson, 42 years old, clutched a cleaning bucket with trembling hands, silently regretting ever bringing her son along. Hassan, a 48-year-old oil tycoon worth over $3.5 billion, was having the most entertaining moment he'd had in weeks. The son of his cleaning woman had just claimed he spoke 9 languages when Hassan wasn't convinced the boy could even read a novel in English. David, apologize to Mr. al-Mansouri, Grace whispered urgently, her voice heavy with years of submission, worn down by the fear of losing the job that kept her 2 children alive. No apology necessary, Hassan said with mock generosity, his grin widening. I'd actually like to hear more of this fantasy. Come on then, boy wonder. What are these 9 languages you claim to speak? David drew a deep breath. At 14, he already understood the weight of prejudice, the way people like Hassan judged him before knowing him. To them, he was nothing more than a cleaning woman's son, black, from the Bronx. Nothing more than a label. English, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Italian, and Portuguese, David replied steadily. Each word rang out, with such clarity that Hassan's laughter faltered for the briefest moment. Liar, Hassan snapped, turning back to his Italian marble desk. Grace, your boy has a dangerous imagination. Maybe instead of dragging him here, you should take him to a psychiatrist. Grace lowered her head, swallowing the familiar shame. For 5 years she had scrubbed that office, endured his insults, accepted his stingy pay, because she had no choice but to keep the job. But watching her son, her bright, determined David, be mocked so cruelly cut deeper than any insult ever aimed at her. Mom, David whispered, gently touching her arm. It's okay. Hassan observed the exchange with a cruel smile tugging at his lips. He relished these moments of absolute power, when he could remind others of their place in the hierarchy he believed in so fiercely. His empire wasn't just built on business savvy, it thrived on calculated cruelty that crushed anyone bold enough to challenge him. You know what I think, Grace? Hassan leaned back in his $15,000 leather chair, smirking. I think your son is jealous of my executives' children, the ones who go to elite private schools, so he makes up these little fantasies to feel important. Sir, David interjected, his voice calm but layered with a quiet dignity that startled Hassan. Do you speak Arabic? Hassan frowned. Of course I do. It's my native tongue. Then you'll understand me if I say. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Hassan froze, replaying the words in his head. What the boy had spoken wasn't tourist-level Arabic. It was classical Arabic, with flawless grammar and crisp pronunciation. Grace glanced nervously between the two, sensing a shift, but not understanding what David had just said. Where did you learn that? Hassan demanded, his composure cracking. David allowed himself the faintest smile. At the public library, sir. They host free language programs every afternoon. For the first time in years, something unfamiliar stirred in Hassan's chest. A flicker of respect, buried beneath his shock. No, he told himself, impossible. This boy must have memorized a phrase or two. Anyone can learn a line, Hassan said, struggling to regain control. That doesn't mean you speak the language. You're right, sir, David replied evenly. That's why I brought this. He pulled open his battered backpack and laid a folded document on Hassan's marble desk. Hassan's breath caught. It was an official certificate of proficiency in multiple languages, issued by Columbia University, each grade proving fluency in all 9 tongues David had listed. That's fake, Hassan stammered, though his voice lacked its former conviction. Wordlessly, David withdrew another paper. This is my certificate from the Municipal Library's Advanced Linguistics program, and this one is from the online simultaneous translation course I completed just last month. Hassan's hands trembled as he examined the papers. Every stamp, every signature, authentic, undeniable. The boy standing before him, the son of his cleaning woman, had achieved a mastery that rivaled seasoned diplomats. How? Hassan whispered, his arrogance unraveling. But what Hassan didn't know, what no one yet knew, was that David Johnson carried a secret far greater than simply speaking 9 languages. And that secret was about to shatter everything Hassan thought he understood about intelligence, privilege, and the true worth of a human being. If you're curious how a 14-year-old managed to outsmart a billionaire, and what devastating secret he still keeps hidden, make sure you subscribe to the channel. What Hassan didn't realize was that David hadn't walked into that office by coincidence. This moment had been carefully crafted for months, hours of research, planning, and preparation, all leading up to a demonstration that would not only shatter Hassan's perception of the boy, but force the billionaire to confront a truth about himself that could dismantle everything he believed. Hassan studied the certificates again, scanning line by line, searching desperately for any sign of forgery. But the harder he looked, the more unease began creeping in. The seals were authentic, the signatures real, the timelines perfectly aligned with a 3-year progression of advanced study. That still proves nothing, Hassan muttered, his words more like a defense to himself than to the boy before him. Anyone can take online courses. You're right, sir, David replied calmly, his composure unnerving Hassan even more. That's why I brought this. From his backpack, David pulled out a tablet and quickly opened a video chat application. Within seconds, the screen came alive with the image of an Asian woman seated in an academic office. Professor Chin, David greeted her in flawless Mandarin. Would you please confirm to Mr. Al-Mansouri my performance in your business translation course? The woman responded at once, speaking in rapid, sophisticated Mandarin. Hassan couldn't understand a single word, but he could hear the flow, the nuanced tones, the layered grammar, the effortless way David engaged with her. This was not memorization. This was mastery. Finally, the professor switched to English. Mr. Al-Mansouri, David is the finest student I have had in 15 years of teaching. At only 14, his Mandarin is as natural as that of a native speaker. From Beijing, he is truly exceptional. Hassan ended the call abruptly, his hand trembling as he set the tablet down. Grace, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Did you know about this? Grace shook her head, still stunned by what was unfolding. David has always been smart, sir, but I didn't realize he… 3 years, David interrupted gently. I started when I was 11. My mom worked 2 jobs to afford private school. But when she lost her second job during the pandemic, I had to go back to public school. The classes were too easy, so I decided to use my free time for something meaningful. A knot twisted in Hassan's stomach. His own children had been handed every advantage, elite schools, expensive tutors, endless resources. Yet here was this boy, the son of his cleaning lady, who had surpassed them all using nothing more than public libraries, discipline, and determination. But why languages? Hassan asked, his voice stripped of arrogance, now edged with genuine curiosity. Because I wanted to understand the world, David answered simply. And because I realized that when you speak to someone in their own language, they stop seeing you as a stranger and start seeing you as a human being. The words hit Hassan like a blow to the chest. For years, he had hidden behind his own Arab identity, keeping distance from his American employees under the guise of cultural differences. But deep down, he knew the truth. It hadn't been culture. It had been arrogance. David's journey has only just begun. If you want to see how a 14-year-old boy's secret will shake the foundations of a billionaire's empire and uncover the truth that will change everything, make sure to hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us for the next chapter of this extraordinary story. David, Hassan said slowly, his voice trembling. You're 14 years old, that's impossible. For the first time since he'd entered the office, David allowed himself a small smile. The impossible, he replied, is just the possible that hasn't happened yet. Hassan's gaze shifted to Grace, for the first time in 5 years. And what he saw was not just his cleaning lady, but a woman who had raised a genius while scrubbing floors, who had given up everything to give her son a chance at something better. "David," Hassan said again, his tone softer now, almost unrecognizable. "Why did you come here today? Don't you realize your mother could lose her job because of this?" David glanced at Grace. She gave the slightest nod, her eyes full of trust. "Because I overheard you on the phone yesterday," David said evenly. "You were negotiating a contract in Arabic with Middle Eastern investors, but you made mistakes that could have cost you millions." Hassan's face drained of color. "What kind of mistakes? You used Mubashir when you should have used Mustajil to indicate urgency, and you confused Miraik with Miraib when talking about deadlines. Small errors, but ones that completely changed the meaning." Hassan collapsed into his chair, suddenly remembering the call. The investors had looked confused, hesitant. He had brushed it off as a bad connection, but now he realized his blunders had nearly sabotaged a $50 million deal. How did you know I was making mistakes?" he whispered. "Because I've been studying business Arabic for 2 years," David answered. "It's my specialty." For the first time, Hassan looked at the boy with genuine awe. This wasn't a child, it was a prodigy. "David," he said slowly, "you saved my business without me even realizing it." "Actually," David replied, pulling another folded document from his backpack, "I did more than that." Hassan unfolded the paper. His hands shook as he read, a comprehensive proposal for restructuring the company's international communications. The document highlighted repeated linguistic errors that had cost the company deals and outlined clear strategies to prevent further losses. "You analyzed my company?" Hassan breathed, stunned. "Only your public communications," David explained. "Press releases, transcripts, online documents, I found patterns of mistakes that explain your lost contracts." Hassan read through it twice. It was brilliant, precise, worth hundreds of millions in recovered revenue. "Why would you do this?" he asked, utterly bewildered. David took a steady breath. "Because I wanted to show you that real value isn't about who your parents are or how much money they have. It's about what you can contribute." Something cracked deep inside Hassan. For years he had believed wealth equaled intelligence. That brilliance was inherited through privilege. But this boy, this son of his cleaning lady, had shattered that illusion in a single afternoon. "Mr. Al-Mansuri," David said firmly, for the first time using Hassan's full name. "Can I ask you a question?" Hassan nodded slowly. "If a kid like me can accomplish this using nothing but public libraries, what do you think kids like me could do if they had the same opportunities your children have?" The words hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. Hassan's empire suddenly felt fragile. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. What Hassan didn't know, what was still hidden inside David's battered backpack, was a recording that would reveal Hassan's failures were not just the result of careless language mistakes. They were caused by something far darker, and David was about to use that evidence to shift the balance of power in that office forever. Hassan was still reeling from David's piercing question when the boy calmly reached into his backpack one last time. What he pulled out made the billionaire's blood freeze. A small digital recorder. "Before I answer your question," David said evenly, "I need to show you something." He pressed play. Hassan's own voice, unmistakable, filled the luxurious office. "These black Americans are all the same. Lazy, uneducated, always blaming others for their failures. That's why I only hire Arabs and whites for important positions." Grace gasped, covering her mouth in horror. Hassan's face drained of all color. "Where did you record this?" Hassan stammered, his composure unraveling. "In the elevator last week," David replied coldly. "You were talking to your vice president about hiring policy. You didn't notice I was standing in the corner." Hassan remembered. Exactly. The heated discussion with Robert Chun about promotions, his careless words, his arrogance. He had thought they were alone. He had been wrong. "That's illegal. You can't record private conversations." Hassan snapped, his voice desperate, almost panicked. "New York is a one-party consent state," David countered calmly. "Completely legal, and since it clearly proves systematic racial discrimination, I'm certain the Department of Labor and every major news outlet would be very interested." The room seemed to tilt as Hassan felt the walls of his empire closing in around him. A recording like this could annihilate everything. His company, his reputation, his billions. Lawsuits, government investigations, public disgrace. One file could erase decades of carefully constructed power. His voice cracked. What do you want? David smiled, but it wasn't the innocent smile of a 14-year-old boy. It was calculated, sharp, the smile of someone who had orchestrated every move in a game of chess. I want you to choose, David said, stepping forward and placing the recorder gently on Hassan's desk. You can keep believing that people, like me and my mother, are beneath you. And if you do, this recording will land on the desk of every journalist, every labor attorney, and every government office in New York. Hassan's throat tightened as David's words cut through the silence. Or, David continued, his tone calm but unyielding, you can prove that you actually learned something today. Here's what I want. Promote my mother to facility supervisor with a salary of $80,000 a year. Create a scholarship program for kids from disadvantaged communities and hire me as a junior language consultant. You're 14 years old, Hassan protested, his voice cracking between disbelief and desperation. And I speak 9 languages better than any adult you employ, David fired back without hesitation. I've already proven I can save your company millions, or did you forget that part? Hassan turned to Grace. For once, she didn't shrink under his gaze. She said nothing, but her eyes shone with something he had never noticed before. Pride, dignity, strength. Grace, Hassan whispered, his voice trembling. You've raised a genius. I've raised a man, Grace replied firmly. A man who knows his worth and refuses to be treated as less. David slid another document from his backpack and placed it on the desk. I've already prepared the contract. You have 5 minutes to decide before this recording becomes public. Hassan's hands shook as he took it. The contract was airtight, professional, legally binding, and filled with safeguards to protect David and Grace from any retaliation. The boy had thought of everything. How do I know you won't release the recording even if I sign? Hassan asked, his voice low, almost pleading. Because unlike you, David said, locking eyes with him, I believe people deserve second chances, if they're willing to change. Hassan scanned the contract again. The demands were fair, shockingly fair, considering the power David held. But signing it meant more than just compliance. It meant admitting he had been wrong about everything, about wealth, race, intelligence, worth. And what if I don't sign? Hassan asked, though deep down, he already knew the answer. David calmly pulled out his phone. Then this recording goes to the New York Times, CNN, and the Attorney General's office in exactly, he checked his watch, 3 minutes and 40 seconds. You're blackmailing me, Hassan whispered, his last defense crumbling. I'm offering you justice, David corrected firmly. You've spent years benefiting from an unjust system, David said, his tone steady but resolute. Now you have the chance to be part of the solution. Hassan turned toward the vast Manhattan skyline, the city he had conquered with a mixture of brilliance and ruthless cruelty. Yet here in this office, a 14-year-old boy had just bested him on both counts. Grace, Hassan said softly, his voice stripped of arrogance. Do you accept the promotion? Grace looked at her son. David gave her a firm, encouraging nod. I accept, sir, she replied, her voice carrying more dignity than ever before. With trembling hands, Hassan picked up his heavy gold pen and signed the contract. His signature curved across the paper, like the ending of an era. David Johnson, Hassan said, exhaling deeply. You've just taught me the most expensive and the most valuable lesson of my life. David tilted his head. And what lesson is that? That real intelligence, Hassan admitted, isn't about where you were born or how much money you have. It's about what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself. David calmly put away the recorder, then extended his hand. Welcome to the 21st century, Mr. Al-Mansouri. For a long moment, Hassan stared at the boy's outstretched hand. Then he clasped it, realizing that this handshake was more than an agreement. It was a surrender to a new way of seeing the world. But just when Hassan thought the ordeal was over, David reached back into his backpack. This time he pulled out not one but two additional digital recorders. "For your information," David said casually, "everything that happened here today has also been recorded. Your words, your choices, and even your signature. All documented, all voluntary." For the first time in years, Hassan laughed. Not the cruel, condescending laugh that had once echoed through his office, but a genuine laugh of admiration. "You're frighteningly smart, kid." "No," David replied with a small smile. "I just prepared better." Hassan believed he had learned the greatest lesson of his life. But David wasn't finished. One final revelation still waited. Something buried in Hassan's own past. A secret that would rewrite everything the billionaire thought he knew about his origins, about merit, and about the legacy he had built. 6 months later, Hassan al-Mansouri sat at a round table in the Bronx Public Library. Around him were dozens of young men and women from disadvantaged backgrounds, each one a recipient of the scholarship program David had demanded. For the first time, Hassan wasn't teaching them, he was listening. And in that humble library, surrounded by the very people he once dismissed, Hassan began to understand the true cost and the true value of change. The man who once saw public libraries as symbols of failure now regarded them as true centers of opportunity. "Maria," Hassan asked a 15-year-old Latina student with a mischievous smile, "is it true that David got his first job at 14 by blackmailing you?" Maria laughed, and Hassan joined her with genuine warmth. "It's true," he admitted, "and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." David, now 15 and officially the youngest language consultant in American corporate history, sat at a nearby desk reviewing international contracts worth millions. In just 6 months, his corrections and insights had generated $200 million new business for al-Mansouri Industries. "Tell us the whole story," Maria pressed. Hassan glanced at Grace, now a confident executive in elegant suits, who nodded for him to continue. 6 months ago," Hassan began, "I was a wealthy man but miserable. I believed my money made me superior. Then David showed me that intelligence isn't about where you come from, it's about what you do with the opportunities you create." Carlos, a 13-year-old now studying programming through the company's new program, leaned forward. "But how did David know it would work?" David looked up calmly. "Because I researched Hassan for months. I learned he had once been a poor immigrant from Lebanon who came to the US at 16, barely speaking English, and built his empire from nothing." Hassan nodded. "David reminded me of something I had forgotten, that I had become the very kind of man who once discriminated against me. And now?" Maria asked. "Now we hire based on competence, not privilege," Grace said proudly. Hassan walked toward a wall lined with certificates, the first 50 beneficiaries of the David Johnson Young Talent Program. "Do you know my greatest discovery?" he asked. "What?" the students asked together. "That when you invest in people, regardless of their background, they don't just grow, you grow with them." David closed his laptop and joined the group. Hassan, once obsessed with power, now realized he had nearly wasted the greatest opportunity of all, the chance to be a decent human being. Carlos asked softly, "David, weren't you afraid of failing?" "Of course," David admitted. "But my mother taught me the biggest failure is to accept being treated as less than you are worth. I'd rather risk everything than remain invisible." Hassan studied him with deep respect. "The most impressive thing isn't that you speak 9 languages or analyze companies. It's that you had the courage to challenge a powerful man, even at great personal risk." "But you had a plan, right?" Maria teased. David smiled. "Always have a plan, and always have evidence to back it up." Grace stood. "Come on, David, we have Japanese investors waiting." As they headed to the car, Hassan turned to the students. "Want to hear the best part? David now earns more than I did at his age, not through inheritance but through merit." Walking alongside them, Hassan confessed, "David, you didn't just save my company. You saved my soul. I was becoming a monster, rich, powerful, but empty. You forced me to remember that true success is lifting others up, not tearing them down." Grace kissed her son's forehead. "I'm proud of you, not for the money, but for the man you're becoming." "And I," Hassan added softly, "am honored to have learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by those who make you want to be better. Later that day, David flawlessly translated negotiations with Japanese investors, sealing a $500 million deal. Hassan watched in awe, remembering how he had once mocked this same boy. Afterward, a Forbes reporter approached. "Mr. Al-Mansuri, how does it feel to be the first billionaire CEO advised by a 15-year-old? Hassan smiled. "It feels like I finally understand leadership. It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about recognizing and nurturing the intelligence of others." "And David," the reporter asked, "what's your advice to young people?" David answered without hesitation. "Never let anyone define your worth by appearances or circumstances. Your origins don't determine your destiny, and always have evidence to back your—" "Do you think your story can inspire others?" the journalist pressed. Grace responded, "This story proves that when you combine talent with opportunity and courage with preparation, there is no limit to what you can achieve." Hassan nodded. "David taught me that real wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you build, and the smartest investment is always in human potential." David's journey proves that true intelligence knows no age, no color, and no social class. If David's story inspired you, don't just watch. Take action now. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment, because your voice might be the spark for the next story that changes lives.